Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we are going to be taking a look at a report from SBI Securities about how Indian companies performed in Q3.
Yeah, this report really does give us a great overview of the Indian market.
Yeah, there's a ton of data here covering everything from those massive tech companies all the way to snack companies.
It's like taking the pulse of the Indian economy,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can see kind of the overall health of the market. What were some of the key trends that you noticed?
Well, one thing that really jumped out at me was just how much global events are impacting these companies.
Hmm.
Like, the Red Sea crisis, for example, that had a huge impact on Wellspun Corp.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're a major steel pipe manufacturer, and that crisis really messed with their supply chains.
So, like, even events happening, halfway across the world are having these ripple effects.
Exactly. It really highlights how interconnected the global economy is these days.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So speaking of global interconnectedness, India's tech sector seems to be booming. What did the report say about that?
Yeah, tech is definitely a bright spot. One big story was LTTS acquiring IntelliSwift.
Okay, I'm not familiar with those companies.
So LCTS is an engineering and R&D services company, and IntelliSwift, they do software and digital solutions.
Okay.
And it seems that LTTS is really trying to boost their offerings, especially in things like cloud computing and data analytics, areas where IntelliSwift has a lot of expertise.
Interesting. So it's kind of like a join forces and conquer kind of strategy.
Exactly. They're trying to stay ahead of the curve in a really competitive market.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But, with all this growth in tech, what about the talent shortage that everyone keeps talking about?
Yeah, that's a big issue. The report actually highlighted how InfoEdge.
They're the ones that run like a big online job platform,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And they saw a huge increase in their employee count, which is great. But their attrition rate is also really high.
Really?
Yeah, people are switching jobs so quickly, which just shows how competitive the market is for talent.
Yeah. So it's like this double-edged sword. The growth is awesome,
Yeah.
but holding on to those skilled workers is getting harder.
For sure.
All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit from the digital world to something a bit more tangible. How about manufacturing in industrial companies? What's going on in that sector?
Well, this sector is facing a lot of headwinds, especially with those ongoing global supply chain problems.
Yeah, those just don't seem to be going away, do they?
Nope. The report mentioned how Amber Enterprises, which is a big AC component manufacturer, they had a lot of trouble getting enough copper,
Oh, wow.
which really hurt their production plans.
Yeah, I can imagine. So amidst all these challenges, were there any companies that really stood out in terms of their outlook?
Polycab, they're a major player in the wires and cables industry, and they're surprisingly optimistic.
Hmm.
They actually launched this ambitious Vision 2030 plan,
Wow.
and they're projecting major growth. They're really banking on India's infrastructure development and the push for electrification.
Wow. Vision 2030. That's thinking long term.
hmm
Are they confident that the demand will be there to support that kind of growth?
Well, they're betting that government investment will stay strong and that the demand for their products will just keep rising.
Huh. It's a bold strategy for sure.
It is. They're also keeping an eye on the U.S. market, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's some talk about manufacturing possibly shifting back to the U.S., which could benefit them.
So it's a
Ex-
gamble, but it could pay off big time if they're ready.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's move on to something that I think is a little bit closer to everyone's heart.
Hmm.
How about consumer goods and retail? What's happening in that space in India?
Consumer behavior in India is changing so rapidly, and it's fascinating to see.
Oh, yeah.
In what ways?
Well, in some categories, we're seeing this trend towards premiumization. People are willing to spend more for higher quality.
So like a taste for the finer things in life.
Exactly. Like HUL, for example, saw a big jump in their premium product sales.
Oh, interesting. So does that mean that the average Indian consumer is getting more affluent? Well, it suggests that at least a certain segment of the population is seeing an increase in disposable income. But it's not a uniform trend. The report also pointed out that there's actually downtrading happening in other categories, like the tea market.
Really?
Yeah. So it seems that consumers are getting more selective about where they're willing to spend.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's
Yeah.
like a balancing act,
Yeah.
splurging on some things while cutting back on others.
Exactly. And it creates a challenge for companies to figure out, how to cater to such a dynamic market.
For sure. And it's not just about shifting consumer preferences either, right? Regulations are also playing a role.
Oh, absolutely. The broking industry, for instance, is dealing with these new SEBI rules like the true to label requirement, which are making things a lot stricter.
Okay.
So companies like Securities are having to adapt quickly.
Yeah, so you really have to stay on your toes in this market. Speaking of adaptations, I was really intrigued by some of the specific company stories in the report,
Mm.
like Dodla Dairy, for example. They're seeing success with this parlor model. What is that exactly?
So instead of relying on those traditional distributors, Dodla is setting up their own parlors.
Okay,
It's like these mini milk bars where they sell directly to consumers.
interesting.
It cuts out the middleman, gives them more control over their brand and the customer experience. And it seems to be working. People like the freshness and the direct connection.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
It's like a farm-to-table concept, but for milk. I love that.
Yeah, it's innovative.
Now, on a slightly less positive note, what happened with Spencer's Retail? The report mentioned some struggles there.
Yeah, Spencer's, a well-known supermarket chain, had to close down some of their underperforming stores.
Oh, wow.
They're facing a lot of competition, and they're trying to refine their strategy to focus on what's working.
So it's not a bankruptcy situation, but they're definitely in what you'd call turnaround mode.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a reminder that even those established players need to stay flexible and adapt. The market can change really quickly.
For sure.
Were there any other companies that had stories that really stood out to you?
Well, there's VIP Industries, the luggage maker. They've been hit by kind of a double whammy of increased competition and changing consumer tastes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, people are traveling differently these days, maybe opting for those lighter, more versatile bags. And VIP's having to play catch-up.
Yeah, it just shows you that even a leading brand can't just rest on its laurels. Staying relevant is key.
Absolutely.
And this is just a taste of what's in this report. There's so much more to unpack.
Yeah, we barely scratched the surface.
Well, we're ready to dive deeper.
Yeah.
So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors to uncover even more insights about the Indian market. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back. And one thing that really impressed me about this report was just how many companies are really pushing the boundaries when it comes to innovation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like Gravita India, for example.
Oh, yeah, they're fascinating.
So they're a recycling company,
Mhm.
but they're not just sticking with, the usual metals and plastics.
Right. They're branching out into some really interesting areas.
Yeah. What?
Well, they're recycling lithium-ion batteries, for one.
Wow.
And they're also getting into recycling steel, rubber, even paper.
So basically, they're looking at all these different waste streams and
Yeah.
figuring out how to turn them into valuable resources.
Exactly. It's smart business, and it's good for the planet.
For sure. And I bet they're tapping into this growing demand for recycled materials too, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're really positioning themselves as leaders in the circular economy.
Smart move. So they must be pretty optimistic about their future then.
Oh, yeah. They've got this Vision 2028 plan where they're aiming for some pretty impressive growth, like 25% volume growth and 35% profit growth.
Wow. Those are some ambitious targets. It seems like sustainability is more than just a buzzword these days. It's a real business opportunity.
No doubt.
All right, well, let's talk about a sector that's always evolving. The Indian snack market. Any interesting trends popping up there?
Oh, the snack market is always fun to watch.
Yeah.
So on one hand, you've got those classic Indian savory snacks that are always in demand.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, Pritop Snacks, for instance, they've been doing really well by expanding their distribution network, reaching more of those rural markets.
So it's all about reaching a wider customer base.
Exactly. But they're also innovating.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're introducing new flavors and even some premium snack options, for those consumers who are looking for something a bit more upscale.
So they're kind of catering to both ends of the market.
Exactly. And health-conscious snacking is also on the rise.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, people want those tasty treats, but without all the guilt.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Ah,
So it's not just about reaching more people. It's about understanding what they want.
for sure. Now, what about traditional Indian sweets? Are they holding their own against all these newfangled snacks?
Yeah, are people still eating those?
Traditional sweets will always have a special place in Indian culture, I think.
Yeah, you're right.
But even there, you see some evolution. Companies are starting to experiment with sugar substitutes, lower fat ingredients, even fusion flavors.
Hey, fusion flavors like what?
Well, imagine a gulab jamun with a hint of dark chocolate or a rasmalai with a touch of raspberry.
Okay, now that's something I would try.
It's all about appealing to those changing tastes and addressing health concerns.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've got snacks covered, sweets covered. Let's move on to the financial sector. What's going on with those neobanks I keep hearing about?
Yes, the neobanks. They're definitely shaking things up a bit.
So remind me, what exactly is a neobank?
Basically, they're digital-only banks. So no physical branches at all.
Uh,
They're really popular with younger, tech-savvy customers who like the convenience of doing everything through their phone.
yeah, it's like banking on the go.
Exactly. They're all about user-friendly apps, fast service.
So are they a real threat to traditional banks? Or is this just a passing fad?
It's still early days, but I think they're a force to be reckoned with.
Hmm.
Traditional banks are definitely taking notice. Some are launching their own digital platforms or partnering with fintech companies to try and stay competitive.
So it's like the whole financial landscape is going through a transformation.
For sure. And it's making financial services more accessible to a wider range of people.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Now let's talk about something that's essential for all this growth infrastructure. India has been investing heavily in this area. So what kind of impact are we seeing?
Well, infrastructure is crucial for economic development, and we're seeing it play out in a lot of different ways.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, renewable energy, for instance, is booming in India.
Yeah, I'm seeing solar panels everywhere these days.
Exactly. And Sterling and Wilson Solar, which is a global leader in solar EPC, they're involved in all sorts of massive projects, both in India and internationally.
So it's not just big power plants, it's becoming more decentralized as well.
Right. And the report also highlighted companies involved in road construction, transportation, logistics.
All those things that are essential for connecting businesses and people.
Exactly. And as India modernizes its infrastructure network, those sectors are seeing a lot of investment.
It's like building the arteries and veins of the economy.
Exactly. And with a growing population, those connections become even more important.
Speaking of population, the report talked about the expanding Indian middle class.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean from a business perspective?
Well, the growing middle class is a huge driver of demand across so many sectors. They have more disposable income, and they're eager to spend it on things like consumer durables, automobiles, healthcare education.
Yeah, it's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
More spending power leads to more opportunities for businesses.
For sure. And companies are taking notice.
Oh yeah, how so?
Well, automakers are launching more affordable car models, for instance.
Okay.
And consumer goods companies are offering smaller, more economical packaging sizes.
Oh, makes sense.
And healthcare providers are expanding their reach into smaller cities. It's all about making products and services more accessible to this key demographic.
Yeah, so it's like a dance between businesses and consumers.
Yeah.
Both sides are adapting to each other's needs and aspirations.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of aspirations, I'd love to hear more about the healthcare sector. It's such a fascinating area, especially with India's growing global profile. What did the report have to say about it?
Healthcare in India is a really dynamic sector. It's this mix of cutting-edge advancements and the challenge of providing access to quality care for such a vast and diverse population.
Yeah, it's a big country with a lot of people.
For sure. And medical tourism is a big trend these days.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, people from all over the world are coming in India for all sorts of procedures, both complex and elective.
So India is becoming a global healthcare destination.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's driven by a few things, highly skilled doctors, advanced medical technology, and of course the costs are significantly lower than in many Western countries.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just about attracting foreign patients, though, right? The domestic healthcare market is also growing.
Oh, absolutely.
Did the report mention anything about the pharmaceutical industry specifically? India is a big player in generic drug manufacturing. Yeah, they are. And while generics are still a major focus, there's this growing push towards innovation, developing new patented drugs.
So they want to be more than just a source of affordable alternatives.
Exactly. Companies like Zydus Cadila and Biocon are investing heavily in R&D. They want to be global leaders in pharmaceutical innovation.
Wow, that's a big shift.
Yeah.
So it's not just pharmaceuticals either, right?
Nope. We're seeing advancements in biotechnology, medical devices, even digital health.
Digital health, what's that all about?
Well, think telemedicine, online pharmacies, health tracking apps,
So it's like technology is revolutionizing healthcare in India.
just like it is in so many other industries.
Right. So with all this innovation, what are some of the challenges facing the healthcare sector?
Well, ensuring equitable access to healthcare for everyone is a big one, especially in those rural areas. And then there's the rising cost of healthcare. Making it affordable for everyone is a constant battle.
So there are definitely hurdles to overcome, but it sounds like there's also a lot of positive momentum.
Oh, absolutely. Both the government and the private sector are working to improve healthcare infrastructure and services.
Well, it's a complex landscape, but clearly a sector with a lot of potential.
No doubt. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have, from recycling and snacks to banking and healthcare. It's been quite a journey through the Indian market.
But we're not done yet. There's one more piece of the puzzle to explore, the investment outlook.
Yeah. So after a quick break, we'll be back to delve into the world of Indian equities and see where the opportunities lie. Stay tuned. Okay, we are back, and now it's time to talk about the part that I know a lot of you have been waiting for, the investment outlook.
Yeah, we've talked about all the trends and innovations, but now the question is, where are the opportunities for investors?
Right. Where should they be putting their money?
Well, as with any market, there are always risks and rewards to consider, but India's story is particularly compelling right now.
Hmm.
They have this young, growing population, which means a rapidly expanding consumer base. That's a huge draw for investors.
Yeah, we talked earlier about that expanding middle class and how they're really fueling a lot of this demand. But India has always been known for its volatile market. Is that still a concern?
Volatility is always a factor, especially in emerging markets.
Yeah.
But for those investors who can handle the ups and downs, the potential returns can be significant.
Okay. So it's not for the faint of heart.
Right. And it's not just domestic investors who are bullish on India either. We're seeing a lot of interest from foreign investors as well. They see India as this long-term growth story.
So where should investors be focusing their attention?
Mm.
Which sectors look particularly promising?
Well, based on the report and our discussion today, I think there are a few sectors that really stand out.
Okay. Like what?
Well, technology remains a hotbed, of course. Companies like Infosys and TCS are leading the charge there. But as we discussed earlier, that talent crunch is a real factor.
Yeah.
These companies are having to spend a lot of money to attract and retain skilled employees, which could impact their profitability down the line.
So investors need to be mindful of those rising labor costs.
Exactly. Now, consumer goods is another sector with a lot of momentum.
Right. That was a big theme in the report.
Yeah, those rising disposable incomes and evolving consumer preferences are creating a lot of opportunities. But as we saw earlier, it's a nuanced picture. We saw both premiumization and downtrading happening at the same time.
Right. So a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah. So for investors looking at consumer goods companies, I think it's important to focus on those with a diverse product portfolio.
So they can cater to both ends of the spectrum.
Exactly. Those seeking premium products and those looking for value. Strong brand recognition and a wide distribution network are also key factors.
So basically companies that can adapt to the changing tides of consumer behavior.
Exactly. Now, how about the financial sector? We talked about those neobanks and the disruption they're causing. Is that an area investors should be looking at?
Yeah. Are those good investments?
Fintech is definitely an exciting space, and those neobanks are making a lot of noise. But it's still a very young market. They face a lot of regulatory hurdles, and the competition from traditional banks is fierce. So for investors, it's a high-risk, high-reward proposition.
Okay. So maybe not for the risk averse. What about those more established banks? Are there opportunities there?
Traditional banks are dealing with their own set of challenges, like rising non-performing assets and tighter regulations. But there's still growth potential, especially in areas like retail banking and digital lending.
So it's a mixed bag for the financial sector as well. Investors need to do their homework.
For sure. Now, another sector worth considering is infrastructure.
Right. India has been investing a lot in infrastructure.
They have.
Yeah.
And there's still massive potential there driven by government spending and the need to modernize the country's infrastructure network.
Okay. So which companies should investors be looking at?
Well, companies involved in renewable energy, road construction, logistics, those are all good bets.
But infrastructure projects often have really long gestation periods, right?
They do. So patience is key for infrastructure investments. It's a long game. But for those investors with a long-term horizon, it can be very rewarding.
So you're essentially investing in the foundation of India's future growth.
Exactly. Now, we can't forget about healthcare. We talked about all the advancements in pharmaceuticals, medical tourism, digital health. Is that translating into investment opportunities?
Yeah. Is that a good sector for investors?
The healthcare sector is definitely booming right now, and there's a lot of investor interest, but it's also a very complex and highly regulated sector. So
Right.
investors need to be aware of the risks, things like regulatory changes, pricing pressures, competition from generic drug makers.
So it's not a sure thing.
No, but it's a sector with a lot of potential for those who are willing to do their research.
Okay. So overall, what's your advice for investors looking at the Indian market? What are the key takeaways?
Well, I think the most important thing is to do your research. Really understand the dynamics of the sectors that you're interested in and invest for the long term.
Yeah, patience is key.
It is. And diversification is also crucial. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Spread the risk.
And of course, having a sound risk management strategy is essential.
So basically, don't go all in on one company or one sector, and be prepared for the ups and downs that are inevitable in any market.
Exactly. And remember, investing always carries some level of risk. So talking to a financial advisor before making any decisions is always a good idea.
Couldn't agree more. Well, on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the Indian market.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has.
Mm.
From recycling to snacks to banking to healthcare, we've explored a lot of different sectors today, and we've seen that India is a dynamic and exciting market full of possibilities.
It is. And we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of the opportunities and challenges that exist in this market.
Yeah, and we encourage you to continue exploring and see where your own investment journey takes you.
Exactly.
As always, keep that thirst for knowledge burning. Thanks for joining us.